I know we can do it if we all lend a hand.
Good evening. Welcome, everyone. Those who are still in the back, come on in, have a seat, please. We're going to get started on time. I know some of y'all not used to that. Well, we're actually going to get started on time. My name is Dr. Lawrence Radheed. I am the African American Student Program Coordinator and faculty member here. This is my second year being a part of this fantastic program, and I'm joined by my lovely co-host from the University of Oregon. I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Stella-Marie Akindayomi. I bring you warm greetings from the University of Oregon. I am a multicultural academic counselor and retention specialist in the Center for Multicultural Academic Excellence. I encourage all of you to please visit the Black Cultural Center as well as CMAE so that we can build community together here in Lane County.
So I felt it was really important to show the collaboration in action between Lane and the University of Oregon, because a lot of our students will be transitioning to the University of Oregon. So that collaborative piece needs to start right now, and hopefully it could continue on. With that being said, this is going to be a fantastic evening as we celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. With that being said, we're going to go into the African American, which is often called the Negro National Anthem. So if we could all please stand, and we're going to hear the presentation video.
A new day, a new day.
Some of y'all sound really good. I can't even sing in the shower, so I was trying to lip sync. But, you know, my sister right here went to an HBCU.
The best HBCU.
Well,
Grambling State University.
Well-
I just had to say that real quick before he went out.
well, I don't know about that because I attended the University of Arkansas on Pine Bluff, the Golden Lion. So, you know, well, we both represent the SWAC.
Yes.
Do we have any other individuals here that may have attended the HBCU? Stand up, please. There it is there. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay. And HBCUs, of course, stands for Historically Black Colleges and University, right? And some of us in this room had the opportunity to visit some of those universities this past summer. And we mention that because it's important to recognize that Dr. King went to an HBCU. Does anyone know which HBCU he attended? Yes, sir. Morehouse. And so it's important to, you know, give HBCUs a shout out because they really make and mold, as you see. And as you see, a lot of us really got our founding and grounding from HBCUs, and a lot of us eventually went on to do graduate work other places. So it's just good to recognize that as we recognize Dr. King on his actual birthday. And again, we did used to beat y'all a lot, you know.
I don't want to call you a liar, but Grambling is leading when it comes to football championships, Black National Championships. No, Black National. Yeah.
Okay, we could agree on one thing. Our colors are both black and gold.
Yes, there we go.
All right? We could agree on that? Okay. Speaking of black and gold, gotta throw it out there. You know, Dr. King was also part of an awesome fraternity called Alpha Phi Alpha Incorporated, which I also happen to be a member of. So I'm just saying, a lot of commonality. And we do have some members from other fraternities and sororities out here. Give y'all shout outs and everything. It's all love. So we're going to keep it moving forward as we go into our next piece. So I'd like to bring up a good friend of mine, Ms. Linda Hamilton, who is the board vice chair of Lane ESD. Give her a round of applause, please.
Good evening. I don't know where to start after watching that. I was going to talk about my elected official position, which is education for the 16 school districts here, but I think I'll tell you a little bit about who I am and why I think you young black folks out there should get involved in civic engagement and make some impact and changes in the state of Oregon. I moved out here from Louisiana. Grambling State was my heart. LSU is still my heart, but U of O is my alumni. So I'm on the President Council here at the University of Oregon for the recruitment and retention of black faculty, staff, and students. I'm also the intern president for Blacks in Government, but I also have 33 years in public safety corrections, law enforcement. I started there when I was 20 because I had an interest in what I saw in Louisiana. So after watching this, I thought, wow, maybe I'll share just a little bit about that and why I got involved in Blacks in Government, which is equity, excellence, and opportunity, professional development, and why I started the first Black History Month banquet in the state of Oregon, because no one seemed to be talking about the history, the Black history. So for the last 10 years, we've been putting on events around diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you're keeping up a little bit with the positions in the state of Oregon, we have some now Black hierarchy in the field, in the professional field. The first African-American Chief of Justice, Supreme Court Justice, Adrian Nelson, from Arkansas. Dr. Yvette at the University of Oregon, from Louisiana. The civil rights manager who's coming in from Arkansas. I'm saying that because people from the South like to see things happen and like to make changes, and we all need to come together and work together and do that. But what I noticed since I've been out here in Oregon, a lot of the hiring and the impact and the movement of peoples from the South, Arkansas, Louisiana, other states, South Carolina, other places. But anyways, so to end it, I encourage you guys to get involved. We have the Black History Month banquet coming up February the 7th. Dr. Radheed will be our MC. It's going to rock for 10 years. There's be quite a few people there of power. And that's not just of power of blacks, of power of whites, because we want them there. We need those allies. We want them to know that the diamond is going to keep moving. It's not going to stop here. We have to keep moving, and we need to get more people engaged, more people elected in positions of power to help us to keep making the changes we're making for the Black African-American peoples in the U.S., especially Oregon. Read your history on Oregon, you understand why I say that.
Thank you, Mrs. Hamilton. So at this time, wanted to do our recognition of Dr. Martin Luther King's King Service Award. But before we go into the video and everything, my colleague, Dr. Nikki Sherry, who was supposed to be here, actually presenting the award to the recipient. As you probably could tell, a lot of people have been catching this flu bug that's going around. And unfortunately, it hit several people that were on the program. And so I've been scrambling like the mad scientist today to make sure everything still goes. But she sends her regards to all of us here. And again, this just shows another piece of the collaborative spirit between Lane and the U of O, making sure that we are connected. So, and did you want to speak to anything about Dr. Nick Sherry or any more of the work that you do on the Multicultural Center?
So I'm a new employee, but in my 3 months here, I am involved with holistic academic advisement in the Center for Multicultural Academic Excellence. as well as making sure that students feel safe and welcome in a space, that they feel connected, supported. So that is primarily my job right now. And I've had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Cherry, and she's just awesome, and I look forward to all of us from UO working with Lane.
Yeah, and she's been here before at different events, helping out in different capacities. So she's been an asset to different events we have, like the summits, the BSU summits. She's always willing to come and volunteer her professional services. So again, we wish her a speedy recovery. So we'll go into the video, and then in her stead, we're not going to shortcut the brother. Mr. Deontay Carter will be the one presenting the award to the recipient after the video has completed.
Recognize wonderful. If you want to be great, wonderful. But recognize that.
Good evening, everyone. Apologies. My name is Deontay Carter. I am an employee here. I am with Student Affairs. My position is Student Engagement Specialist. I know this person very well, and I tell you it is an honor to be up here for the second time to present an award to an African-American veteran employee. And first, I just want to talk a little bit about the things that this man has done. He's been a teacher, and a great one at that, a father, a mentor to many. He has led the drug counseling program for more than several years. He has touched many hearts and souls along the way and still does things from the kindness of his heart. So from the bottom of my heart, I'd like to present this award in recognition to Mr. Mark Harris. Please come up, sir.
The mic is mine. I'll leave some room for the next person. Thank you. Being described as a veteran of this place where historically I'm the second longest African American employee at this institution. And a lot of times I do describe it as a battle, a struggle, a southern state in the Northwest. As a Black Vulcan would say, a fascinating study of how institutional racism works on every different level and beyond that. The 13th Amendment was born here. So the things that I've been able to do are largely due to the support system, and I'd like to thank my lovely wife, Sherry Turpin. Because we've raised seven children, 8 grandchildren, and our history project, for example, which got infused into rites of passage, ethnic studies, BSU, was largely due to our sons and daughters getting in trouble for saying Beethoven was Black and the Queen of England was Black. And, well, Jesus too, but, let that go. I don't want to get into too much trouble. But I'm glad to have been able to inspire other lives and touch other lives and have other people begin to touch other lives. And I truly feel like a servant, and thank you.
Thank you.
And signed with a pen and ink of self-assertive manhood his own Emancipation Proclamation.
Wow. I think that was pretty appropriate to follow Professor Harris in that clip of Dr. King. Those of us who know Professor Harris know how brilliant he is. He's a walking griot. That's a West African storyteller or poet, and he definitely is that. And just selfishly speaking, he's been a great asset to me, a mentor, a friend, and it helps that he was on my hiring committee too. So that's always a good thing. But in all seriousness, he's phenomenal, and there's just not enough that we could say about his contributions to, the Lane community and the greater Lane community. So again, I hope he stays close, because I often harass him just for my own selfishness. At this time, we're going to bring up another brilliant brother, Mr. Eric Richardson, who is the president of the NAACP, and he's going to do a multiplicity of things. He's going to come up and speak to the march that is going to be coming up pretty soon, and he's also going to jam for us. So we're in for a treat. So without further ado, Mr. Eric Richardson.
Well, it's quite an honor to be here today. When I first graduated from high school back in '86, I actually came straight to Lane Community College, and I was playing my bass out in the orchestra. So I played orchestra 1 year, played a couple gigs. So it's good always to bring Shube Mingulem, who is what I call my bass, back to the campus. With all seriousness, today is a very solemn day to be celebrating the life of Dr. King in the midst of these times we live in the midst of the show of ill leadership. All of the things that Dr. King spoke against, we are witnessing exist and exhibited in the actions that we see in the White House today. And so we have to understand that this is not about Democrat, Republican. It's not about anything. It's about the right thing. What kind of human being are we talking about? What kind of leadership are we exhibiting for our youth? Let alone what kind of leadership are we exhibiting for those who really need us as a nation else in the world? For hundreds of years, African peoples paid the highest price for this nation to exist, for its ideas to be formulated and birthed. But they have yet to grow, to reach maturity. We're still in an adolescent stage, and that's why we can have leadership such as we are showing today as adolescent leadership. Our country has yet to grow into maturity, but with the help of black people over the last 155, 56 years, this nation has been able to grow. And it's fits and bounds. And unfortunately, just like the black Christ that my brother spoke about, we see bodies in the street today that are sacrificial bodies for the life of this country. And so this country has a spiritual life, a moral life, and Dr. King was speaking to that. And he said we won't be free until all the people in the United States can gather together and sing in the black spiritual tradition. So what he was saying is that we all have to really encompass and understand and appreciate the beauty, the agency, the life, the insight, the wisdom of black Africa and black people. This is yet to be done. We have an academic situation here where my brother spoke about the words that we use, and that you look in the bio, or you look in the dictionary, white is all negative, black is black. But if you go back to the most ancient language, which is the Medu-Neter in ancient Egypt, which is a black African language, which is a black African civilization, and you look in what they said about what black is. They called their land the great land, black land. They called their God the great black. They called themselves the black people. So it's a matter of whose language and whose story you want to listen to. I think that Dr. King was a great reader. People he didn't only read the Bible. He had to have read Gandhi. He had to have read other people for him to formulate what he was saying. But just like he said, you don't have to know about thermodynamics to be a servant. But believe me, it helps if you want to build a nation. And we do want to build a nation. Our people already built the physical structure of this nation. We've paid much price. And so now we want to build the spiritual structure of this nation, and there's work to be done on that front. And so I come today as the president of the, I'm not the president of the NAACP, and I'll just speak a little bit about that. The NAACP is a 11-year-old organization next month. We have relied on the blood and tears and the struggle of black people themselves to lift ourselves out of our situation. And we have done great work for ourselves and this nation. But all that work was done with a model that said, black folks, we don't have financing. The white folks ain't gonna let us in the bank to get a loan to do this civil rights, social justice work. Therefore, we're gonna do a church model. We got 2,000 branches throughout the nation. Well, each one of y'all are going to send back 60% of y'all money to the national so that we can hire a good lawyer and we can fight Brown versus Board education. That worked back then, and we did good work at the national. Now we need to do good work in the local area. So what that means is that we need to figure out how to bring economic development to the black community. And one of the oldest institutions in the black community, other than our fraternities and sororities and our black churches, is the NAACP and the Urban League. And so I just want people to think about those institutions that our ancestors have helped to establish for us to man and woman so that we can do this work. And so I just encourage you all to get energized about how you can go into these older organizations and lift them up, because they don't exist without individuals with blood running through their veins. And so today I had a small little medley I was going to play for you, calling it, what am I going to call it? I'm going to call it the Black Man's Medley. But I really do think that African Americans are special people. Black people are special people. We're all special people on this planet. But I think we all owe a special debt to the black African, because and to Africa, our mother. And so with true sincerity, I think, and a hand of love to all people, and recognize all people's cultures are of worth. But black Africa's culture goes back into antiquity beyond the study that has been afforded, that we have the means to afford it. And so I think that we need to go into study. I encourage all you young people here to take up the study of Africa, of indigenous black Africa, of our psychology, of our music, because all those things are tools for bettering our circumstances. So today I'm going to play a tune that's made famous by John Coltrane. As I always do, as you ever see me play, I'm always playing like 3 or 4 John Coltrane tunes. But this one is called The Wise One. But and I'm gonna mix it up with the Thelonious Monk tune entitled Friday the 13th, and then you'll hear the last one you probably heard a little bit earlier today. So thank you all for bearing with me.
Let's give another round of applause to Ms. Richardson, please. So you may see some young people from the BSU passing out index cards and pens, and that's to capture questions that you may have specifically for Ms. Brown. So we kind of do it in a more structured way and less kind of hooting and hollering way, just so we could have it more, we could get a chance to address a lot more questions that way and a lot less grandstanding. So my apologies if that offends anybody, but you know, we want to keep it moving. Speaking of keeping it moving, at this time, I would like to bring out our Provost and Executive Vice President, Dr. Paul Jarrell.
Thank you, Lawrence. Congratulations, Mark. Very, very deserved. I am filling in for President Hamilton. As Dr. Radheed mentioned, the flu bug's been going around, and she got it this morning. And I found out about this about 2 hours ago, so I apologize for looking at my notes as I make a few comments here. I feel really, like Lawrence, this is my second time at this event. And I was reminded last year at this event, and I want to bring it to the forefront again today, that while we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s Martin Luther King Jr. Day on Monday, today's his birthday, and I think it was a very conscious decision on the part of the committee and people that organized this event to have it on his birthday. It was on his birthday last year, it's on his birthday today, and I think that's very fitting. I want to also highlight that this is the only holiday we have that really is a day of service. It's supposed to be a day, not a day off, but a day on, I believe, as they call it, so that we can dedicate ourselves to service in memory of Dr. King, because there was so much good work that he did and so much more work that still yet needs to be done. I want to be very clear. There's no doubt in my mind I'm an incredibly privileged person. I have a lot to learn, and I have a lot of room to grow, and I appreciate these events and bringing people to campus to help encourage that growth in me and in others. I grew up in southern Ohio and eastern Kentucky. I'm ashamed to admit, but will admit that I didn't speak to a person of color until I was 18 when I went to college. There are reasons behind that we can have a conversation about over a cup of coffee sometime. It's enlightening for me to always have conversations and remind myself about that. But I do have a lot of room to grow, and I'm encouraged by the conversations that we get to have on campus and the spaces that we try to make to really allow room for people like myself to grow and to be a better person and to be a better advocate and a better partner. In the early 90s, I came out to the University of Oregon to do graduate school. I met my wife here. We started a family in Oregon. I started teaching in Southern Oregon. And life took us to South Central Virginia. My wife grew up, yes, I don't need to say a lot around that, but my wife grew up in Los Angeles. I grew up in Eastern Kentucky. We came from very different backgrounds, right? Very different environments, and we were placed together in a very different environment. You heard before the mention of Brown versus the Board of Education. I took a teaching job at a small liberal arts college in South Central Virginia that was in Prince Edward County, which was the county where Brown versus the Board of Education was litigated. There was, rather than integrating the public school system, the county decided to close the public school system, and they opened a private academy for all the white kids, right? There was a generation of individuals denied an education, and it wasn't until years later that the public schools were opened back up. When we moved to South Central Virginia, I had 2 young children at the time, and my wife was staying home with the kids while I was away in a very enlightened area, I guess, on a college campus, working and teaching. And I had a very different experience in that environment than she had. I remember coming home one day from work, and my wife had taken the kids to story time at the public library, and naively or not asked the question, how come there are no black kids in the library? The response, without losing a beat from the librarian, was, "Oh, we don't like them to check out the books. They don't come back the right way," or whatever. It's like, oh my God, right? Many of you experience that every day. I'm aware of that, and I apologize for that, but I feel empowered by that to try to do work to make that better, and I hope that we can do that together. Needless to say, my wife and my mother-in-law, who was living with us at the time, both from California, were incredibly unhappy living in the environment that we were living in. I remember my mother-in-law was she was sort of a metaphysical person, and she thought we have to have a sign. There'll be a sign, right? And it was about this time of the year, and this would have been 1995, where we said we were trying to make the decision, do we stay another year or do I look for another job? I need to apply for things. And my mother-in-law says, there'll be a sign. Let's look for a sign. And it was a Monday morning. It was Martin Luther King Day in South Central Virginia. Burkeville was the name of the town I was living in. Opened up, it was a Monday, I was home, everybody was home. Opened up the curtains in the living room, and this, across the road from my house was this large, rather sort of plantation-esque looking home. And I had never seen a Confederate flag flying in their yard before, but on Martin Luther King Day was a Confederate flag. My mother-in-law says, Paul, we have our sign. And needless to say, I haven't lived there. I lived there for 9 months. We moved back to California and started there. But what was interesting was when I tried to think a little bit more about that Confederate flag on Martin Luther King Day, I asked my neighbor, what the hell are you doing? He's like, well, this is Lee Jackson Day, right? And I don't know if many of you are familiar with the history in Virginia around Lee Jackson Day. Of course, Robert Lee and Stonewall Jackson were two Confederate generals, and they had a holiday in Virginia to commemorate Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson. And they thought, wouldn't that just be fitting, since we're required by federal law to have Martin Luther King Day, let's tack that on to Lee Jackson Day, and we can call it Lee Jackson King Day. Something doesn't seem right? At least that was in the mid-90s. In the year 2000, the state did vote to separate those two holidays. Mind you, they didn't vote to do away with the Lee Jackson holiday. And when is it? It's Friday before the Monday of Martin Luther King Day. So it's still wrong. It's still, we have a lot further to go, and I don't certainly need to tell you about that. But this, I can say, I think this holiday changed my life for the better in the sense that I left a place that I wasn't comfortable. I found a home, I found a purpose, and I feel empowered by the work that I do. I don't think that that's necessarily always the best answer. I think I could have been a good advocate, a better advocate with my frame of mind and mindset in South Central Virginia, much more than I could here, but we make decisions for different reasons at different points in our life. Wealth gaps, wage gaps, employment discrimination, housing discrimination, racial profiling, racial surveillance, incarceration, immigration, drug enforcement policies, infant mortality rates, maternal mortality rates, life expectancy, access to education, access to health care. The list can go on and on. Structural racism is not something that a few people or an institution chooses to practice. It's ingrained in our social, economic, and political fabric that we all live in. We have an obligation to do something about that. Dr. King was doing something about that. There is an ever-increasing need to continue his work, to continue to address these systematic biases and racism that prevent progress toward equity and justice. Luckily, we do have many individuals that are carrying on that work. Our keynote speaker, LaTosha Brown, is one of those people. LaTosha Brown is an award-winning community organizer, philanthropic consultant. Could have had her singing up here. She sings jazz. She's a political strategist with more than 20 years of experience working in the nonprofit and philanthropic sectors of the country on issues related to social justice, economic development, leadership development, wealth creation, and civil rights. She's a co-founder of Black Voters Matter Fund. She's a principal owner of Truth Speaks Consulting. She's very active in community renewal efforts throughout the South, other regions in the U.S., and certainly throughout the world. She's a trusted expert and resource in community organizing, rural development, special programming for a number of national and regional philanthropies, and has been instrumental in raising and amplifying the voices of many marginalized people on this planet. In recognition of her work, she has been the recipient of several national awards, including the Red Book Magazine Spirit and Strength Award, Spirit of Democracy Award, Lewis E. Burnham Award for Human Rights, Emory Business School MLK Service Award, Audubon Award, White House Champion of Change Award, and I'm sure the list goes on, but just to name a few, we're very thankful that she is continuing on Dr. King's work. We're very thankful that she is here to share her thoughts on that work with us today. She currently lives in Atlanta, Georgia. We're very thankful that she is here today, so please join me in welcoming Ms. LaTosha Brown.
Good evening. So I want to show a video. I want you all to join me in watching a quick video.
One of the things that really stood out today was our stop in Lansing. Sister Angela, Black Lives Matter Lansing, she had a crew of maybe 25 young folks from about 12 up to college age, and we had a great discussion talking about organizing.
Close your eyes for a second. If you went to a school that you felt loved and valued, what would that look like?
I want to see actual police officers be moved out of the schools because why do we have police officers in our school? Like, they're here to protect us, so who's being protected in the schools? The teachers being protected from us, or?
All these things that we want to see done better at our schools, who makes those decisions and policies?
The school board, the superintendent who is hired by the school board. How does the school board get in place? Do you know? They get voted in. There comes that voting thing again.
If there was other people that have been here were in power, there would be totally different things that would be going on, more empathy, more different types of training for police officers, etc.
Tell us a recent incident.
The police hitting a teenager while she was handcuffed in the backseat of the car.
How old is she?
She's 16.
Then they gave specific incidents of police violence that happened just a couple of months ago, where a young girl was beat up by a police officer, brutalized, kicked, repeatedly punched. They refusing treatment and refusing to acknowledge her injuries, but then the officer had the nerve to complain because in the process of beating up the young girl, she hurt her wrist. Like, she's hitting her so hard that she hurt her own doggone wrist.
Did she just hit her?
I swear to God,
She's
did.
punching her.
As the young folks were sharing the story, you could feel the pain. You could see it. I looked around the room and I saw eyes tearing up. I looked at a couple of young brothers and all they could do was look down because you could see how upset they were. And so we used that moment to turn into a teaching moment. We worked it through with them to figure out, well, how does it make you feel? What could be done? What would you want done if it was you? And so the students, the young folks started saying things like, we want people to say something, to protest, to get the officer fired.
We got in our bus And as we're riding down the street, 15 minutes later, we get a call where the young folks were inspired. They moved immediately. The next thing we know, we got a picture with this group of young people meeting with the chief of police. We didn't even know what to say. When you have energy, you put that with instruction and opportunity, it's amazing what things can happen. Thank you. Well, the first thing I did right was the day I started to fight. Keep your eyes on the prize and hold on, hold on. Well, the last thing I did wrong, I stayed in the wilderness a day too long. Keep your eyes on the prize and hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize and hold on, hold on. Amen. Amen. I wanted to start that song for a particular reason, but before I get to that, I want to just kind of reflect on what you saw on this video. And I think that it gives, I think it's going to set some context of what I want to talk to us about tonight. That in the course of this video, of course, it was highlights. We were in this group has been working on it's a youth leadership development group. They meet weekly, and they had a 6-week program that they were working on. We met these young folk and had worked with those young people of the course of less than 2 hours. And I'm raising this because I want you to see that if you all paid attention to the process, that when they told us about this beating of this young girl, if you actually saw their faces, you could see their faces, you could see their posture, you could see the pain, you could actually even feel the pain in the room. It was so thick. In a matter of less than an hour, that pain got turned into possibilities and to promise. And I think that's what we've got to think about when we're talking about where do we go from here and where we are right now. How do we really take the pain and transform that into potential and possibilities? And so in order for us to do that, we've got to be honest. We've got to be honest about when we're talking about where do we go from here, we've got to be honest about where are we now. And we've also got to be honest about where have we been and what has been the results of that. And so I started with that song because I am a native of a little city that some of y'all may have heard before. You ever heard of Selma, Alabama? And so as many of you would know that Selma, Alabama is known for the voting rights movement. This year is the 55th anniversary. It's 55 years ago when Bloody Sunday took place in Selma, Alabama, when people who were fighting for the right to vote were beaten on the bridge by law enforcement. And as a result, it actually led into a greater part of the movement where folks marched from Selma to Montgomery, a 50-mile trek, right, for the right to vote. And it was the impetus of that and the energy behind that actually led to the passage of the Voting Rights Act, which this year in August will be the 55th anniversary of that as well. And so I raised that because what I came here to do is I didn't come here to be a speaker to entertain. I didn't come here to be a speaker just to say some nice, wonderful things. I came to be a speaker to be in conversation with you because, y'all, we got work to do. And we've got to be honest about where we are and what has to happen. And so given that, I'm raising that because I think it's really important that when we talk about, America, we've got to be honest about America. We have all fed into this belief of American exceptionalism. America is exceptional. It is the greatest country on earth. We believe in democracy. We believe in fairness. Racism is not here. Shoot, we had a black president. All of those things that each and every one of you, if you are honest, you know it's not true. And so the question is, where do we go from here? let's be honest and let's just take a moment to even think about where it is that we've been and where we are now. And so I say where we've been, but I want to start with where we are now. You know, when we talk about where we are now, we can actually put our heads down and act like everything is okay, right? Or we can get engaged in an argument to say, are you blue or you red? Or are you Democrat or you Republican? Part of the problem is we're not having an honest conversation in this country. This isn't about the Democrats or the Republicans or about the left or about the right. At the center of this is supposed to be about the people. The last I checked, I didn't see a constitution that says it should be power to the parties. The Constitution says it's the people, that the government is to support and protect its people. And so we've got to be honest about that. And we're not being honest about that because it feels okay for us to go around and say, I have good health care when there are 27 million people around this country that don't have health care. Why would I not want, fundamentally, if I am tapped into my spirit as a human being, why would I not want you to have access to health care? There's something fundamentally wrong, y'all, when we allow that conversation to be a conversation about partisanship. That is a conversation about humanity. There's something fundamentally wrong when we reduce people to a passport and digits. What do I mean by that? That we are now at a point that we are reducing the value of a human being by what color their passport is and where are you from. You are not as human as this child if your passport is from Peru or Colombia or Mexico. How dare we? Yet we say we live in the greatest country on the earth. I'm raising this not for us to feel bad, but for us on this day, as we're talking about Martin Luther King and celebrating his legacy, for us to be honest and for us to also be reflective of where we are and what is being called of us at this moment. How can we be truthful and how can we really address those things that need to be addressed, right? In the spirit of what we call love. And a lot of times folks think about love. You know, we've got to the point now that in America we sell love. We sell it in little red boxes on February the 14th. We sell it on TV. You know, we sell love. But ultimately, let me ask every person in here, who in here does not want to be loved? Let me ask another question. Every person in here, just see your hands. Who in here, there's somebody in your life you love? Everybody in here, somebody in your life that loves you. Raise your hand. I'm raising that is because that ain't about Democrats. That ain't about Republicans. That's not about independents. That's really about humanity. We've got to center this conversation differently. Because now we're having a conversation. I'm often on MSNBC. I am a political pundit. I'm often on NBC and CNN and some of the others. And I'm constantly pushing this conversation around. We've got to get outside of this box of having a non-conversation and creating these false equivalencies. Like this is just a matter of who, like we're playing tug of war. We're playing with people's lives, y'all. Why is it okay for any of us to think that it is okay for children to be separated from their parents? Would you not do anything for your child? Because I would walk to hell and back for mine. And if it meant saving my child to go to a border, I would go across that border. How many of you would not? If my child, if my family was on the brink of starvation or murder, I would walk to Russia if I had to. Who in here would not? And so we have the audacity to think that there is something wrong and inferior for people who are doing what you and I do, which is fight for our families. How dare we? I say this not as an indictment, but as a reflection for us to take this moment and reflect
and reflect what is being called of us right now. What is being called of us in this moment? That at the end of the day, in some way, caught up in the American exceptionalism, is this idea that some way, if I feel that I am better than you, then there's value in that. And on some level, I talked about this earlier, on some level, part of what makes America work is every single one of us believe that one day we're gonna be a millionaire. Y'all know it, everybody in here. At some point, everybody in here believes, if I can just come up with that right idea, if I can just get the right job, if I can just come up with the right business, or if I can get those winning numbers, that eventually I will be wealthy. And because we're all following that false dream, that is why we've got 1% of the population that is controlling 80% of the wealth. And we're okay with it. That's not a partisan conversation, y'all. This is a conversation about how will human beings live together and how will we share this beautiful earth that we have. Now, of course, there's other kind of political policy pieces. I promise you, I'm so not talking about this around pushing a particular party because I can equally find, well, I don't know, equal might be a stretch, but I can certainly find some fault and flaws in all of the parties. This isn't about that. The fact that we allow these conversations just to get held hostage within that context is why we are where we are. The truth of the matter is, if this is the wealthiest country on the face of the earth, as it is, then why is it? Why do we have millions of people right now that are working and can't afford their rent? And we're okay with it. Why do we have hundreds of thousands of children that are going to school every day and don't have a home and are going back sleeping in homeless shelters? Because we've normalized it. Because what we've normalized is American exceptionalism. One day, I want to share this story. Me and my super social justice self, I was on, some of y'all will appreciate this. So it was the beginning of the year and I was on a diet. This was some years ago, right? Because at the beginning of the new year, that's when you're gonna have this resolution, right? And so I am gonna be on a diet so by the summer that I could be fine. And so in that process, I decided that I went completely vegan, except once a weekend, I would actually allow myself to eat whatever I wanted to. And so Gladys Knight had this restaurant in Atlanta called Gladys Knight Chicken and Waffles. Anybody heard of it? And so they had just these nice old greasy, wonderful, just salt-filled chicken wings that you just know is just not good for you, but they taste wonderful, right? And waffles. And so this was my weekend to go. So I went to get my chickens and waffles this weekend. And as I'm going inside, I see that there's this homeless man that was sitting on the stoop right by her business. And he was eating some food. I spoke to him. I went inside, ate my food. And I had, when food is so good, you don't want to eat it all, you want to save it. And mind you now, I only had one weekend, so this is my splurge meal, so I got to save it. I got to stretch it. So I took my couple of wings and the rest of the food I had, I was like, no, I'm not going to eat it now, I'm going to save it for later. So I put it in a box, and as I was walking out, this same man who I spoke to as I was going in, he said to me, hey, man, he was like, hey, ma'am. He's like, can I have your food? I was like, oh, Lord, wait. Because being brought up in the Baptist church in the Deep South, like I was taught by my family that if someone asks for food, you give them food, right? So I was like, oh, not these prized chicken wings, but okay, right? And he said, can I have your food? And I said to him, you know what? I gave it to him begrudgingly. And I was like, you know what? You eat better than me. And he looked at me and he said, what, you think I shouldn't? And it messed me up. I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned that night because he was right. What I was saying was that in some way I had earned those chicken wings, that I had gone to work And I paid $14.99. Those were some expensive chicken wings, right? $14.99 for this meal, right? And I had saved it, and it was my weekend. And there was something that I felt that I was more deserving of this meal than he was, right? Even if I didn't want to admit that, and even though I didn't really think that way, right? It was after I said to him what I said that he pierced my consciousness. And I could either deny it. You know, most of the time when someone pierces your consciousness, what's the first thing you feel? You get angry, right? Like, that's when you know there's some truth in it. You start getting hot, your ears get hot, your chest, you're like, You start humming up under your skin, They don't know what they're talking about. You close your eyes, you feel some tightness. Because part of that is your trigger. And that trigger is telling you that there's probably some truth to that. Right? But oftentimes, we're not courageous enough to want to have that conversation. It is better for us in America to act like we don't see it. It's better for us to say, well, you know, you're like this because of the things that you've done. Let me say, I don't know about y'all, because I know some of y'all might be perfect people, right? But being that I am not perfect, that I know that I've gotten away with a whole lot of stuff. And I've been extremely blessed and privileged and sometimes just darn lucky to be in some of the positions that I'm in, right? But I recognize that. And so while I would love to say, oh, yeah, I did this work for myself and I pulled up my bootstraps. Well, somebody gave me my boots and somebody showed me how to tie them. And someone would actually help clean them up when I needed them to clean up. And sometimes somebody would actually let me borrow their boots when I didn't have a boot. And someone taught me how to walk in them. So I've not found a person yet that you created the boot, you framed the boot, you tied the boot up, and you wear the boot. The truth of the matter is all of us are interdependent on each other. And if we really absorb that and take that in heart, how will we treat others? And so when we're talking about the beloved community and we're talking about community or chaos, I want to go back to the question. Where do we go from here? So I'm going to ask you all, I want a little audience participation. I'm going to ask you all to do something for me, real simple. I want you to kind of just sit up straight up in your chair. Make sure your feet are planted. And then I want you to close your eyes, and I'm going to ask you a question. What would America look like without racism? Open your eyes. How many people couldn't see anything? Exactly. So how will we ever end racism when we can't even visualize it? Many of us have never even been asked that question because we say that we want it to end, but we're really not serious about it. We would like to think that racism is just an individual issue, that it's an individual incident, and we don't want to deal with the structural racism that exists, or the structural classism, or the sexism, or the fact that minimum wage in this country actually was created out of racism. The fact that there's a wealth gap in this country was created out of racism. That not only 200 years of people were working and enslaved Africans and not able to even benefit from the fruits of their labor. That's 200 years, y'all. That's generations, right? But not only that, but that even once that they were working, that even for my grandparents, right, wealth was stolen over and over again. I can tell you a story about my grandfather in Orville, Alabama, who had a white father and a black mother, who lived and farmed the land, and when he turned 18 years old, his father got all of them a moonshine gin, their own business, and that when his father died, his white cousins took all the land. I can tell you about Social Security, FHA, that was created that excluded black homeowners. I can tell you about the Black Farmers lawsuit, which you all should look at, the Pickford lawsuit, which is the largest settlement against the United States government in the history, in which Black farmers lost there was the largest land loss of any group of Americans beyond the indigenous community in the history of this country. And what did they get? $50,000. You can't even buy a lot for $50,000. I'm raising this not for anybody to feel bad. I'm raising this for us to feel honest, to be honest and think about where we are and what is it that we've got to do. We've got to really make some things be true. And so I want to read this one of my favorite quotes from Dr. King, and we use this in our work. My work with Black Voters Matter, we started the organization. It's really interesting because we started, as you all saw, we got the Blackest Bus in America, that we're working in 11 states, and it's interesting that what we started our organization. We don't call ourselves a civic engagement group. We are a power building group. That ultimately, this isn't really about rounding up people just to vote. This is really about reminding people of their own power and really organizing them in a way that they actually are self-determined. That's what this is about. This is really what democracy is about. We've corrupted democracy and made it be about something else. We've corrupted a lot of the beliefs that we have and made it be about something else other than what it's about, which is ultimately the people. And so there's a quote. What we use is, in our work, we use love and power. That if you get on the bus and at any point in time, and you know, it's really interesting because while I certainly, within my work, believe that there is a place for identity politics, that is not what I think. I think for us to get stuck just in that idea is very limiting. Right, that ultimately this is really about humanity. And because of that, you would be surprised. You would be surprised at the hundreds of Asian women who are volunteers and do text messaging and phone banking for us out in Seattle, Washington. Or the white women who are coming and ride with us and support us and raise hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to support the work. Or our Latinx brothers and sisters in Arizona that work with us. Why are those folks supporting our work? Because they recognize that when we're standing in our power, we remind them of their own power. And that's what happens. And so we've got to recognize that when someone stands in their own power, that it has the ability to activate you. When you see hope in me, right, you can have hope for yourself. And so as we work that way and as we organize around that way, we can really change and transform what exists. And so when we do our work on the foundation of love and power. And no, I'm not talking about that anemic love. Thank you. I'm not talking about love that we can buy at CVS I don't even know if y'all have CVS. Do y'all have a CVS here? Okay, all right. At CVS or Walgreens, right? But I'm talking about real love. That kind of love that when I ask you all to raise your hand, what was interesting when I asked you all who loved you, I meant to take a picture, but I forgot. I saw you all smile. What is it that made you smile? Because love feels good, right? Because love is good, and love is a power. And so what we do in that process is we own it, we say it, and we do our work around it. And so let me give this quote. I want to share this, our favorite quote that we use by Dr. King, and it says, "Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love." So where do we go from here? Where we go from here will be dependent upon us, y'all. It's not the political parties. It's not who's going to be the next Democratic nominee or who's going to be the next president. It will be us. When we stand up and we demand that the America that we envision comes into fruition, it will. But part of what that means for us, what does that mean for us? Part of what that means for us is, what is your radical reimagining of America? I want you all to spend some time with that. What is your radical reimagining of America? Because when we're talking about democracy, okay, we're talking about democracy, yet 33 million people have been dropped from the voting rolls in this country. Disproportionately people of color. But we're talking about democracy. The fact that we're in 2020 and there's actually there is an actual argument and debate or whether a woman, by the way, who represents the majority of the country, because women, are the majority of America, the fact that we're even asking the question of can a woman win means there's something fundamentally wrong. And so it will continue to be so unless we demonstrate the courage, y'all. Not just to have another commentator, make another commentator say some kind of piece, and then we go back and repeat it. This is really about us and about your children and your children's children. Show me where another child having the opportunity to eat takes away from me. Show me where implementing justice to others does not expand justice for me. Also, I want to talk about racism. We've got racism in this frame that racism is only damaging to black folks or people of color. No, 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 no. My white brothers and sisters, racism has been just as damaging to you, if not more, because anything that corrupts the spirit or corrupts the way that you see other human beings impacts your spirit. And what is more valuable to you than your spirit? So when we're talking about racism, this isn't just about us saying we're freeing people of color. This is about us freeing each other. And so I hope you all hear me. I know I'm passionate. My son says, "Ooh, mama, you fuss all the time." I'm not fussing. Even though my aunt, I did come out of the Baptist church, and I swear I think all the ushers just used to fuss at you every week. But ultimately, y'all, I hope you all can feel and hear the spirit in which I am raising this. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the waters. We shall not be moved. I come from a people that did not have any money. They didn't have government on their side. They didn't have policy. They had a belief, y'all. They were on that bridge in Selma, Alabama, when all the odds against them. And they did it anyway. And they did it because they believed in something even greater than themselves. People often say, well, yeah, folks were fighting for the right to vote. People weren't fighting for the right to vote. They were fighting for the recognition of their humanity. And having the access to vote was a demonstration of them being able to have power of governance. And so what I want for myself, I want for my neighbor. Because ultimately, it makes me happy to see happy people. Why is it that comedy works? Why is it that when we're seeing a movie and we see something sad, we cry with it? Because we are so connected as human beings that the state of other people impacts our state. And if that is the case, I want to live in a happy world because I want to be happy, right? And I want to live in a just world because I want to feel justice. And I want to live in a world that I can be amazed at, oh my goodness, look at your gift and your gift and your gift. I am interested in knowing who you are. That's the world that I want to live like. I would not want to live in a world with everybody like me. I would not. And I think I'm pretty fabulous, but I would really get on my nerves in about 7 days. I could probably live with me about 72 hours, but at some point I was like, okay, girl, this is too much, right? But ultimately, that's the beauty, y'all. Let's lean into it. We don't have to move away from it. And so as I get ready to close, what I just kind of want to share, I want to go back to this question. Because I know you're saying, well, what's the answer? You have the answer. The answer is, will we have a beloved community or will we have chaos? Will we continue to tout that we are the richest country on the face of the earth? Yet we've got millions of people that are living out of their cars and on the streets. Will we continue to spend trillions of dollars on defense and fighting wars? Or will we invest that in the people and the infrastructures in our communities? That's not a partisan conversation. That's the conversation we should be having. Because isn't that the thing that matters? However you see that, it might be a policy difference, that's fine, but I'm talking about principles. And I'm talking about values. And what is it that we value? Once upon a time, I thought there was a man that said this: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women, I'll put that in, are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. And among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's some powerful words. And it's never been realized. Even the founders of this country didn't have the vision. They couldn't even see their own vision. Or they couldn't even see a vision beyond themselves, let me say that. And so now I think that it's up to each generation. And I raise that, I do want to go back. I raise that because I raise around the founders, because oftentimes, and I know there's some people that may disagree with me on this, that oftentimes I hear people and they were like, well, what did the founders intend? What did the founders intend? Well, it was up to the founders, I wouldn't be up here right now, right? So what they intend, right, is they were limited in their vision. They couldn't see me in the space that I'm in right now, or millions of others like me. So that in itself tells us there was something fundamentally flawed or even limited by their vision. So I'm not just interested in having this conversation of let's go back and see what the founders intended. I'm more interested in what you intend. You are the founders of this America going forward. You are making decisions right now about what America will look like 50 years from now. And so when we're talking about where do we go from now, the question from you is, where do we go from here? Where do you want us to go? Number one, what is your vision? What America do you vision? Secondly, what is being called of you to bring that vision about? And third, what is it that you're willing to give up? Because it's okay to talk about moving forward, and we ain't got to give nothing up. But what do you have to give up? And so I think if we have an honest conversation, as I get ready to close, if we have an honest conversation about those things, imagine the possibilities and the potential of this country. I would love to live in a country that I said that not a single child was hungry. Like, that just makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. And some of you say, well, I don't think that's possible. There were some people that didn't think I was possible, yet I'm here. Because someone did think it was possible. And so I'm saying to you, stretch yourselves. Stretch your own. It's easy for us to say, and I'm saying this in the state, while I come from Georgia and Alabama, some real special states, you know, it's easy to come in a state that, you know, we think of as liberal and not really be honest about how racism shows up and how classism shows up and how discrimination shows up. It's easy for us to look at Tennessee and say that. But it's hard for us to acknowledge it in California, in Oregon, and New York. So as I leave you today, I'm going to ask you to do a couple of things. The first thing I'm going to ask you to do is, I'm going to ask you to stretch yourselves with your radical reimagining of what America is, what America can be. 2, I'm going to ask you to love a little harder. And love a little harder and stretch yourselves of what that means. Love means saying the truth. Sometimes we walk around in politeness, and I'm from the South. I can tell you about Southern politeness that is so not true, can I? We know a little something about that, right? But if I stand in truth and I stand in love, even though you disagree with me, right, you can see some value in my being if you, in fact, are truthful and if you, in fact, are rooted in love. So there's nothing wrong. We're talking about disagreement like everybody in America is going to think the same. Do you think that everybody in America is going to think the same? I change my mind every week about what I like and don't like. Of course we're not. But there's some values that we can be aligned around. And those values in such a way that they don't hurt or harm others. That's what I'm saying. And so instead of us pretending that all of us have to be on a certain party, if all of us have to be a certain way, or all, if anything, all of us need to be reminded that we are human and that we're living and sharing this beautiful earth with other human beings. And what could that look like in a way that was just and fair and rooted in love and power? That's what I'm asking of you. I'm asking you to go deep in your heart, not in your mind, but in your spirit and your heart. You know when things are wrong. You know when you're saying things or you're doing things that you're being discriminatory or you're looking for folks at different ways or at different ways. You know there's something inside you. If you're just a little tapped in that you know. So I'm asking you to stand in your love and stand in your power and start having not polite conversations, but honest conversations rooted in truth and love. That way, I don't think that we have to stand away and like we can't disagree. Some of my best, y'all should hear me and my best friends. You all be like, they are crazy. Why? We disagree and we are just like, and strong opinions. But it's so much love and trust there that we can disagree. Because fundamentally, we've got a foundation together. So it is okay for us to disagree. It is not okay for us to discriminate. It is not okay to see other people hurt and not do anything about it. It is not okay for us to be okay with supporting either party or either candidate or anybody when we know that democracy is fundamentally fragile. Because that's the other piece that we're not being honest about, the fragility of democracy in this country and how some people have access to the ballot and some do not. It must change, and it can change. So where do we go from here? We can choose one road out of two. We can choose a road that leads us to chaos, that's filled with hatred and bigotry and sexism and classism and inequity and injustice. We can continue that road, and we can bomb everybody that we don't agree with us. And we can claim that we're stronger because I can kill the most people. And we can take our money that we can take care of seniors in our communities and children in our communities and buy another fancy bomb. That's one road we could go. Or we could go another road. We can go the road of building the beloved community, which may mean everybody ain't gonna get along, but we're gonna work this thing together. And fundamentally, there's going to be a love for humanity. And fundamentally, we're going to love each other enough to go through the struggle together. And we're going to transform the resources in this country in a way that all of God's children benefit. That's the second way. And so I leave asking you, what road will you choose? Thank you. And thank you all for having me here.
Let's give her another round of applause, please. And she could sing. I said it right, too. Sang. That's how we say it. So at this time, I would like to have individuals. We're going to have Brother Keyshawn. He's going to facilitate the Q&A. So if you could at this time, we'll have people collect the cards that you have specific questions for Ms. Brown. And we'll start that. We'll maybe 15, 20 minutes if you have specific questions. So I'm going to give a mic to you. Okay. And I'm going to give a mic to you, sir. And we'll collect the questions. And we'll give them to Keyshawn.
Any questions? And thank you all for coming.
These are really both good questions right here. The first question is, what books are you reading right now?
Oh, that's a good one. You know, that's a good one. I'm actually reading Water Dancer. I'm reading a book. Anybody reading Water Dancer? It's good, right? It's amazing. It's a book about a young boy who is a genius. Like, what happens to a genius that is enslaved? Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote the book, and he actually did a talk at Harvard, and it really got me interested. Between the World and Me was another book that that I actually just finished because I was interested. It's funny because I always read 3 books. I'm always reading like a nonfiction, a fiction, and sometimes I like a lot of spiritual book. It might be a metaphysical book. It might be something about running. I'm like, yeah, I'm all over the place. Like I like, right? And so, but for some reason, kind of this moment that I'm in right now, I'm very, I'm full right now. And so I've had to be really mindful about what I take in. So I haven't been reading a lot of political books that I normally read. I had to read something. I've been reading because I'm so engaged in the work, the political work. I've been reading books that allow me kind of a space to just kind of release and relax and read. And there's another book I've been reading, which is fantastic, by Hope Ayers, called Gabriel's Balloon.
Okay, second question. What strategies do you use to effectively communicate with people who don't understand or want to understand institutionalized racism?
You know, I think that part of, let me say this. My goal is never to try to make somebody feel bad. You know, I think sometimes people it's almost like sometimes people can be bullies. Right? Even bullies with the microphone. I feel like this is me and it's my personal belief. I believe that when the universe, or God as I call it, gives me a platform, it's even in that platform, even though I can say some stuff that I know might make you feel a little warm and fuzzy inside, or hot and bothered, that ultimately it is always my intention that is delivered in a space that you know that my intention is in love, and right? And so I say that because I think that part of when we're talking about racism and institutional racism, that's a really uncomfortable subject, particularly. I think it's interesting because I think folks think that black people are comfortable with talking about it. You think I want to talk about racism? I don't want to talk about racism no more than any other person, just like I don't want to experience it. But it has to be said. And because the pain of not saying something and not addressing it is so much greater, that I am forced by the nature of my being that I have to say something about it. So in that case, I think part of what has to happen is, I think, a couple of things. One, I think we have to connect with people on a human level, that literally be able to connect with people and to build some trust and some space. But then 2, I think that we have to be, I don't think that we need to sugarcoat talking about racism. I think we got to say it. We got to say what it is and what it makes us feel, and trust and believe. Sometimes you got to trust the human spirit. I just got to trust that those that are really interested in doing something about it can hear me. And sometimes even those that don't, but if they're who it hasn't been a thought of theirs, but that their spirit, if there's some human connection that I've made, right? often I feel like that's also an opportunity as well. So that's just been my strategy. I don't know if what has been the right way for other folks, but for me, that has been my strategy to, one, really look at making the connection, really be able to educate folks, let people be able to feel where my come from is at, and also always let people know that I really do believe that there's hope. That all of us, I don't think that there's any person that is beyond, that cannot change and we can't transform.
Okay, there are just 3 more questions. Third question is, what and how do the people of the country, this democratic republic, get rid of...
Is that what this is? Okay. I'm listening.
Okay, I'm gonna repeat it. It says, what and how do the people of the country, this democratic republic, get rid of the party system, institutionalized race system, and cited politics to the hood government more accountable, and racially change our country?
Ooh, that's a loaded question right there. If I figure that question out, I will be president. I will just say I think I get the spirit of the question. Let me just say without going through each of the parts of the question. The spirit of the question, I think, is 45% of the people of this country that are eligible to vote do not participate in the process. You cannot have a robust democracy if half the people are not even participating. And so even as we do our work, so let me be clear, as we do our work, we are not telling people to believe in the system, a system that we know is fundamentally flawed. When we're doing our work, we're telling people to believe in themselves. And that in that process, as they are voting and as they're doing work, we believe that transformation and change happens when people step up and they demand that. That's our belief. And so ultimately, when we're talking about what this America can look like, and it seems like they already got a vision of what they want it to look like, I think ultimately it's really about doing the work. It's about doing the work and making every single person in this country feel like they have value and that they should be a part of the process of what governs them and who governs them.
Okay, we have just 3 more questions.
Okay.
These questions are on reparations.
Okay. Y'all coming with it today, huh?
This one intrigues me the most.
Okay.
Many of us want reparations. How can we move that idea into reality?
We got to do the work. I know you want the fancy, sexy answer. You got to do the work. If your only conversation about reparations is once you get to an event and we bringing it up, you're not doing the work. You got to do the work. And I wish I can give you some other way to talk about this, but guess what? You got to do the work. And so what that means is that means you've got to organize, you've got to educate, you've got to learn, you've got to read, you've got to know about what that means. What has that looked like in this country? What are other people doing around that, right? You know, it's really interesting because I do want to bring this up. This is about England, but, you know, people talk about, you know, why we need reparations when it's really interesting. Up until 2012, the UK, England, were paying reparations to the families who had owned slaves. Look it up. I always tell people, Google me. Google it, right? That ultimately what happened is when slavery was abolished, particularly in the islands, that made an agreement with the families that they would compensate the families, not the enslaved, but the slavers, that they would compensate them for a loss of their property. And the government of England, of the United Kingdom, paid that all the way up until 2012. So you pay reparations to those who exploited the enslaved Africans. But then we question whether enslaved Africans and the descendants should get paid. When there is a history. Not just there's a history in this country, and even if it wasn't a history, do the right thing. How many of you Spike Lee? Do the right thing, right?
Okay, this one is right now middle black family is worth. I'm not gonna do that question. What are some of the most powerful, important ways you think white people can be allies to people of color?
That's a great question. I think that the way that America is going to change is it's going to be us together. I'm clear. It's going to have to be a coalition of people, right? We don't have to believe all in the same thing, but we got to have the same values. And so I think that one of the ways, particularly, and I'm specifically saying this to my white brothers and sisters that are out here, you've got to do your work. Just the same thing I said to reparations, do the work. What does that mean? You've got to work around how does racism show up in your life? How are you? All of us are impacted by racism. How does that show up for you? How do you absorb the values of that? One of the things that I often say is, you know, one of the things that we've got to do is we've got to do the work in our home. We've got to do the work in our communities. Some of your communities, they're not going to listen to me the same way they're going to listen to you. But it's not okay for you to say, okay, I'm one that I'm conscious and I'm woke, when you know that your community continues to hold beliefs about the values of people. So you got to do your work. Say, do the work. Do the work. Do the work. Do the work. Do the work.
That's all the questions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those great questions. Well, this concludes our very special evening. Give everybody another round of applause, please. So, I would like to do some brief acknowledgments, and if I don't mention someone, blame it on my head, not on my heart. Definitely want to acknowledge the Office of the President, our board members who came out, the foundation, the Roberta Connie Endowment. I want to thank the Multicultural Center and my colleagues. I want to thank the BSU for their all hard work and dedication. Give them a round of applause, please. Definitely want to thank Marcia Seals. Where is she? There she is. Big round of applause for her. All her support. I know Tracy Weimer left, but I want to give a big round of applause to her and Miss Andrade and everybody that helped. Dan, the photographer. Dr. Jarrell for stepping in. Appreciate that. And all of you, Joan, I see you back there. Thank you for the PR and all the support. KLCC, and most importantly, you for coming out and bearing this weather, right? It's really cold and windy and everything. You could have been at home, but I'm glad you decided to come out. And again, we thank our keynote speaker. She did a wonderful job with Dr. Brown. So you don't have to go home, but you know the rest, right? All right. Okay. All right. Good night.